everybody for joining us on a Friday in August. We know that the child tax credit is an extraordinary opportunity for families. And we also know that a lot of kids are being left behind right now because parents don't know they're eligible, if they're non-filers, if they're immigrants, if they're on CalFresh. There's so much confusion. So we thought that it was an important opportunity today to get experts that can talk about what it is, who's eligible, what resources are available to those living in California, and then also a bit about what to watch for in 2022 and the role of our sector in advocating on behalf of families at a time when hopefully more money can help lift children out of poverty. So excited, you guys, to have a rock star group today, smart people that were willing to walk us through all of that. And as Patricia mentioned, this is supposed to be a conversation that's valuable to you. So please put questions in the chat. We'll leave time to talk, ask questions, make sure that we understand. And there'll be resources in the chat with links that you can access, and then you'll get copies of all the presentations today. So with that, good to see everybody, and thank you so much. Anna and Gabriella, we'll start with you.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Hasselblad. I am the Director of Public Policy for United Ways of California, and I'm so excited to be able to join you all today to talk about this important issue and share along with my colleagues some of the information that we think is really critical at this time and just be a resource. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in, and just let me know if there's any issues with seeing my slides or anything like that. Let's get to, yes, here we go. So just quick background, United Ways of California, we are the state association of the 29 local United Ways all across the state. We cover pretty much every single county, and the state association really exists to engage in a variety of strategies to improve the health, education, and financial results for low-income children and families. We do that through advocacy and community impact work. And the one thing that I want to mention about United Ways of California in particular, because we're going to be talking about the tax system and how it can be leveraged as a poverty fighting tool, is that we are the co-leads of the California Earned Income Tax Credit Coalition, which is a group of organizations, approximately 60 organizations, that focus on specifically leveraging the poverty fighting power of our tax system by ensuring economic inclusion and resources for all Californians. And that's really pivotal to obviously the child tax credit, among other tax credits. So a little bit of background on who I am and the organization that I get to be with. And now we're going to dive into a little bit of the child tax credit policy landscape. So I'm going to click through and just make sure all the words are on this slide ahead of time. What we wanted to do was just sort of provide, the background of, okay, what is the scenario that we find ourselves in right now? So the child tax credit was temporarily expanded in the 2021 American Rescue Plan, and it included 3 really important changes that we haven't seen before. So perhaps one of the most important, it was an increase in the benefit amount. So that tax credit went up per child. It also expanded access to reach children and families with the lowest income. So previously, the child tax credit had smaller amounts or $0 amounts for the lowest income families and households. That has changed. Every household is eligible to receive the full tax credit amount. And this is really huge when you're thinking about who's going to be, who's been the hardest impacted by COVID-19 and who was experiencing poverty prior to COVID. So that's a big change. And the thing that we're going to be talking a little bit today about is, of course, how can you access that credit for individuals that have filed their taxes or filed with the IRS for economic impact payments. The child tax credit payments are going out automatically. A portion of that full child tax credit amount is going in a monthly payment, either a direct deposit or a paper check mailed to the household. And that those payments are from $250 to $300 per child per month. Pretty incredible. But as we're going to talk about during today, not everyone is aware of the credit. That's a big issue that we need to contend with, and therefore not accessing it. And not everyone is eligible. And so there are families that are excluded on the outside looking in, and that's a place for advocacy. So moving along, what I do want to talk about is, so the American Rescue Plan was passed. What has happened since then? And so we're going to talk a little bit just briefly about some efforts that have happened between nonprofits, community-based organizations, congresspeople, representatives at a local level, really putting themselves in a shared space, mostly outside, to promote and really focus on the impacts of the child tax credit. So around July 15th, there were events across the nation to highlight the child tax credit. July 15th was the day that the first payments were going out. So that's when dollars actually hit bank accounts. So there were lots of events, social media, press events, etc. United Ways of California, among many others. We certainly don't claim to be the only one in this space by a very long margin. Put together a resource list. I will go ahead and share that in the chat in just a moment. It's a resource list of sort of frequently asked question sheets, fact sheets, and also just some social media posts that are available to get the word out. So this was just a time of a lot of activity. In just one moment, I'm going to show you some of the impacts, some of the press coverage, and the momentum that was built up around that July 5th launch. And really where it was directing folks that maybe have not filed their taxes yet and did not register for the economic impact payments, where they can go to claim the child tax credit. So I want to note that there is an online non-filer portal for individuals that aren't receiving the child tax credit as of yet. This is, I know I'm going to actually click over to the sign up tool. This is the page, and it's in English only. And it's not actually completely embedded in the IRS site. It is a separate page or a separate portal. And so I just want to raise that because I think it's important for us to be really cognizant of access issues. We're enjoying the benefit of having a live translation today. This website does not offer the same level of access. And so there are some challenges that remain in getting folks not only aware of the online portal, but utilizing it. So that's something to be aware of. I wanted to also highlight that Code for America will be launching in the near future an additional child tax credit portal. And I'll click over to that page as well. That has not fully launched yet, but the idea is it will be more accessible. It'll be in more languages, it'll be mobile friendly. So there are going to be increased ways for folks to be sure that they're claiming the child tax credit. But at the end of the day, the best way to get that child tax credit and all of the tax credits that a household may be eligible for is to file your taxes. United Ways of California is really proud of our work in this space. We're really proud of our partnerships at the local level with so many CBOs who offer tax navigation or volunteer income tax assistance program services, so VITA. Those are free services that are available to income eligible households to get help filing their taxes. We also offer a completely free and in multiple language online free filing portal. It's called myfreetaxes.org, pretty straightforward. You can also text taxes to 211-211 and get a lot more information. And it's really designed in multiple languages to be accessible, to be helpful, to tell you like, what paperwork do I need? What does this mean? What's the definition of this? If I need to talk to somebody, how do I do that? So lots of resources for families, but it's really important to get that information out into the community. The exciting thing that happens when you file your full taxes is that not only do you get the child tax credit, but if you're eligible for a bunch of other stuff, that comes your way as well. And so in California, we have the California Earned Income Tax Credit. We have the Young Child Tax Credit. We have the Golden State Stimulus. When you file your full taxes, you are eligible to receive all of those. That is a huge amount of money, and that is a huge impact that we can have in households. And so I just really want to emphasize that this is something that we want to focus on getting the word out about. So I'm going to move on to my next slide. I can click over, here we go. So I just wanted to highlight some fun things that have happened, as we've been doing outreach and engagement. So working with congressional reps, really championing their local partnerships and nonprofits, working on getting the word out. So here's Representative Matsui, Representative Katie Porter, et cetera. NPR and Marketplace doing some press coverage, Representative Panetta in Santa Cruz, Representative Costa in Fresno, who did vote for the budget resolution recently, which was good. And then I feel like this is just like cherry on top, like 5,000 cherries on top. Kerry Washington has done a 3-minute video, essentially an FAQ on the child tax credit and how to claim it. If you haven't seen this video, I encourage you to find it. It is chef's kiss wonderful. It's authentic, it's straightforward, and it really shows how important this is. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about is really what's on the landscape for policy. What's next, what has to happen at the federal level, and where are our voices important? Well, our voices are important everywhere. But specifically on the child tax credit, there is some stuff happening that I do want to highlight. A critical point, I think, that is getting some news coverage and is an opportunity, again, to push the message about how critical the child tax credit expansion and permanency is that in 1 month, in the month of July, 3 million children were lifted out of poverty. The child poverty rate was reduced by 25% by the child tax credit going out into households. That is incredible. It's also really important to note who is still, again, on the outside looking in, who has not received that, who's not being included in that monumental shift in poverty, in child poverty in America. And Gabriela is going to talk more specifically about that, and I'm excited to pass the mic to her in just a second. So there's still a lot more to do, and we need to make this permanent. That poverty rate reduction should be every single month, and the impact that that will have in a longitudinal way year after year is going to be incredible. This is truly transformational, but only if we make it permanent. So the federal budget negotiations, I won't get too deep in the weeds. If there's questions, I'll be happy to answer them later. But the budget negotiations are at a point essentially where the pathway for the child tax credit permanency, along with a few other wonderful safety net program extensions to be included, is fairly is quote unquote fairly straightforward. I put quotes and I sort of smirk about that because there is no such thing as a straightforward process when it comes to the federal budget. However, we do have an opportunity via what is called reconciliation to sort of streamline a budget bill to go through to the Senate to get passed, and then to the president for signature that will include the child tax credit expansion. But we have to stay loud. We have to really communicate clearly with our Congress representatives and senators that this is a critical priority and that we expect them to fight for this, and that we expect them to make it permanent, and that we expect them to pay attention to who has not been included so far, and to make changes necessary to ensure that all residents, California and US residents, immigrant resident or not, are able to access this incredible poverty fighting tool. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Gabriela. I will continue to screen share, and Gabriela, take it away.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was a great presentation. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabriela Barbosa. I am the Managing Director of Policy at an organization called the Children's Partnership. I'm also the first in my family to be born in the United States. I'm very proud of the fact that I am a daughter of immigrants, and I've dedicated my life to advancing laws and policies that support children from historically marginalized communities, including the community that I came from. So who is the Children's Partnership? We at the Children's Partnership advocate across multiple issue areas for child health equity through community engagement, systemic public policy change, and research that support and address the needs of children and families from historically marginalized communities so that all children have the resources and opportunities they need to grow up healthy and thrive, no matter their race, ethnicity, or where they were born. In the last year and a half, our priorities have really shifted in order to respond to COVID-19 and the pandemic's impact on the health and well-being of children from marginalized communities. Next slide, please. So one of the populations we've really been focusing on in the last year and a half are children in immigrant and mixed status families who've really been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and make up a significant and growing share of California's children. And what I mean by mixed status families is a family whose members include people with different citizenship or immigration statuses, including, for example, families where the parents are not citizens, but the children are US born citizens. Many adults and children who are US citizens, lawful permanent residents, or other legal immigrants live in mixed status families with undocumented immigrants. Roughly half of children in California have at least one parent who was born outside the United States. And about 1 in 8 of California's K through 12 students, or 882,000, have at least one parent who is undocumented. And more than 1/3 of the nation's 11 million undocumented immigrants have at least one citizen child. Next slide, please. Furthermore, California's children in immigrant and mixed status families themselves come from very diverse backgrounds. They are not a monolithic group. There are about 253,000 children in California who are not citizens, about 70,000 of whom are undocumented, according to a recent study released by Forward. And as you can see from the chart, our state's population of children are very diverse. They come from various racial and ethnic backgrounds. Over half, or 207,000, are children of color from Black, Asian American, Latinx, and Native American backgrounds. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that you have a picture of who this incredibly diverse and beautiful population is, I'll now describe how the undocumented and mixed status families that we work with were left out of various iterations of federal COVID-19 relief. During the pandemic, immigrant families have both been overrepresented as essential workers, as well as disproportionately impacted by the collateral economic consequences of the pandemic, including unemployment and loss of income. Immigrant women in particular have faced the highest rates of unemployment since the pandemic and shutdowns began, compared to immigrant men and US-born men and women. They face an 18% unemployment rate at its peak for nearly a year. Yet despite the economic instability that these families experience, they did not and do not have equal access to most forms of economic assistance, which for me is more than just a political issue, it's a moral issue. Alarmingly, undocumented immigrants and their citizen and legal immigrant family members face restricted eligibility for most forms of economic support. For example, US citizen and legal immigrant spouses and children living in families with undocumented members receive lower benefits from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Undocumented immigrants, whether in mixed status families or not, are entirely barred from unemployment benefits, SNAP, and EITC, as well as federal stimulus payments. Additionally, undocumented and mixed status families were further marginalized by being left out of various iterations of federal relief meant to mitigate the harm of the pandemic and its destabilizing impact on children and families. By the end of April 2020, Congress, with near unanimity, had passed 4 bipartisan federal pandemic relief packages. However, undocumented immigrants, including those who pay taxes with an IRS-issued individual tax identification number, ITIN, and their US citizen and legal permanent resident relatives were excluded from all of those 4 packages, including the historic $2 trillion Corona Aid Relief and Economic Security, or the CARES Act. The CARES Act had provided one-time cash payments to income-eligible people who filed taxes for either 2018 or 2019 using a Social Security number. The vast majority of undocumented immigrants, except for those with work authorization, such as those with DACA or TPS recipients, were thus excluded, including those who filed taxes using an ITIN. The CARES Act also excluded mixed status families from cash payments by excluding payments from anyone filing jointly with an ITIN filer, even if that person was a US citizen or green card holder with a social security number. Thus, in families where even one family member filed using an ITIN, the entire family was rendered ineligible. And as you can see from this analysis and graph that comes from the Migration Policy Institute, that meant that nearly 4 million US citizen children were immorally and unjustly excluded from federal pandemic stimulus checks under the CARES Act. And over 1 million of those children were here in California. Next slide, please. Moving into the present, in addition to enduring long periods of social isolation without friends or extended family and losing family members to COVID-19, children continue to grapple with stress stemming from economic dislocation and their parents' loss of jobs and income. The latest data from the Census Pulse survey from July 2021 highlights that children and families of color in California continue to face serious economic hardships. Nearly 1 in 2 Latinx households with children in California had difficulty paying for usual household expenses in the past week. 1 in 3, or 33% of California's Latinx and Black households with children have experienced a recent loss of employment income. And nearly 1 in 4, or 22% of California's Latinx and Black households with children sometimes or often did not have enough food to eat in the past week. Next slide, please. So as that last slide really highlighted, families continue to face multiple issues that impact their health and well-being. COVID-19 and its destabilizing effects on mental health, food, income, housing, and education, which is why at the Children's Partnership, we are advocating for permanent and inclusive economic relief for children and their families in the upcoming recovery bill that Anna mentioned, and specifically that 1, Congress make permanent the American Rescue Plan Act's expansions of the child tax credit and its provisions making it available to children whose parents have low or no earnings. And in California, we know this would benefit nearly 8 million children under 18. And the vast majority of those are Black, Latinx, or Asian American. Secondly, we are also advocating for an inclusive child tax credit that once again becomes available to immigrant children who have ITINs. These children actually used to be eligible for the tax credit, but a 2017 tax law under the Trump administration revoked their eligibility, and restoring it would help hundreds of thousands of their families to meet basic needs and decrease hardship while better positioning these children and in turn the future economy for later success. So we are pursuing these 2 priorities in coalition with, of course, our partners like the United Ways of California, but at the federal level, we're also working with a network of organizations who have dedicated themselves to defending and supporting American children and immigrant families. And this network is called the Children Thrive Action Network. The Children's Partnership helped launch this network and is a steering committee member, and we would love to invite all of you to join us in this work and advocating for these 2 priorities at the federal level. Next slide, please. So in addition to advocacy, our organization also works to make sure that families know how to access the resources that support their health and well-being. And so I'd finally like to end by sharing a resource we just released for families in both English and Spanish that we hope you'll share with the families and direct service providers that you work with. This is a checklist meant specifically for families to help them know and understand what they have access to from the American Rescue Plan Act and from our recently passed California state budget. And all these resources and support child and family health, economic stability, and well-being. It includes information about accessing income supports like the child tax credit that we're speaking about today. It also includes information about the economic impact payments and Golden State stimulus payments with special information meant to help inform mixed status and immigrant families. It also includes information about reduced healthcare costs, including the ability for Medi-Cal members to stop paying their monthly premiums and save money that way. It includes information about how families can access the emergency broadband benefit to reduce internet costs. It also includes information about the California Rent Relief Program and PEBT, among other really important programs and services. So I'll go ahead and drop those links in the chat. And that's it for me. And I will now pass it to Roxy Keynes from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to sharing with you some of the resources that are available to help get the word out about the child tax credit. So I'm going to share my screen. And before we get started, I do want to share a little bit more about the organization that I work for and the project that I work on. So the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is a nonpartisan research and policy institute, and we pursue federal and state policies designed to reduce poverty and inequality in equitable and effective ways. I work with the Get It Back campaign, which for more than 35 years has been dedicated to promoting refundable tax credits like the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. And we also help connect people to free tax filing assistance. This is a national effort and a national campaign that includes a wide variety of organizations. So for the child tax credit, you've already heard a lot about what it is and how much it's worth from Anna. So I'm not going to go into the details that you see on the screen. I do want to highlight again that the child tax credit is available to a large number of families, including families that haven't filed a tax return recently and families that don't have recent income. Also, a lot of questions come up about whether this is a loan, and it is not a loan. And if someone is receiving public benefits like SNAP, they can get that and the child tax credit. Getting the child tax credit does not affect public benefits. So the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities released a research paper in July on the need for outreach for the child tax credit. And in this paper, we looked at who gets the payments automatically and who it doesn't. And so for the first round of payments issued in July, the IRS was able to send those payments automatically to 60 million children. And it's based on whether their family has filed a 2019 or 2020 tax return, or if the family used the 2020 IRS non-filer portal to get stimulus payments. So what that means is that nationally, about 4 million, roughly 4 million children or more are not getting payments automatically. And in California, it looks like this breakout that you see on your screen, where you have 371,000 children who have health insurance, and there's an expected 202,000 newborns that will be born into Medicaid coverage. And because they're a newborn, it means that they won't automatically receive the payments. All newborns will have to their families will have to sign up that child to get the payment, or just claim the child on their 2021 tax return in 2022. So this means that there's a lot of money that is going unclaimed. And this is part of the need for outreach to make sure that families can get this money. In addition to the child tax credit, There's also stimulus payments that have gone unclaimed. So just think about this number being even larger. And so the IRS has developed 2 portals that assist families to get the money. Sometimes there's confusion about the portals, so I just want to share briefly about what each one does. You already heard a little bit about the non-filer portal. People can go there if they don't have a tax filing requirement and aren't eligible for other tax credits. They can sign up for the child tax credit payments. They can also get previous stimulus payments. And if someone doesn't have children and they miss the stimulus payments, they can get them here. The child tax credit portal allows people to opt out of advance payments. Some people prefer to get a larger lump sum at tax time, and some people are getting advance payments based on their tax return and they're not actually eligible. People can also change their bank account information or their mailing address information. And later in the year, they'll be able to make changes to the number of children that are claimed. That's where that newborn comes in, change their income and marital status. And so in doing outreach, many people will need to use one or both of these portals. And as Anna mentioned, very soon, as in next week, there will be another resource for people to submit their information to the IRS, another alternative to the non-filer portal through getctc.org. So you also heard a little bit about how there are other tax credits specifically for the state of California that mean that families are eligible for even more money. And so with these tax credits, you get them. So again, directing people to the non-filer portal may not be the best option. It may be better to just encourage people to file a full tax return. So what can you do as a nonprofit leader to contribute to CTC outreach? Well, here are just a couple of ideas depending on your organization and how you interact with others. You can display flyers in your office. You can include child tax credit messaging in written communications, whether that's a newsletter or email, or if you have a texting program, for example. You can also incorporate information into any phone interactions. If you are calling people directly, or if you have a hotline where you could record a hold message that includes information about the child tax credit. You can also post information online on your website or through social media. And you can share information with client and staff. And so this slide includes links to resources and templates to help you do all of these things. And I'm going to share a little bit more about the resources that we have available. So our Child Tax Credit Outreach Hub is taxoutreach.org/coronavirus. There's a lot of resources here, and I'll be sharing more links later. This is the number one link to keep in mind that will allow you to connect to everything. When you go to that link, this is the top of the landing page that you'll see. And at the bottom is where we feature some of our outreach materials. So we do have a child tax credit outreach kit that includes messaging. It includes media pitches, sample PSAs. It includes 2 social media toolkits. So we have one that has a general information focus, and then another one that has more of a back to school theme focus. There's all of the scripts for some of the ideas that I shared previously, and flyer and poster. We also have done trainings for those that have the capacity to help people directly to sign up for the payments using the non-filer portal. We have guides on both the non-filer portal and the child tax credit update portal, as well as a navigator training. And then we do have several resources for immigrant outreach and link to resources in other languages that other organizations have put together. So this is just a snapshot of some of the resources from the child tax credit toolkit. So these are some of the more general social media posts. These are some of the ones that have more of a back to school theme. And then this is our flyer, and there's a a postcard that is modeled after this. And we're having this translated into 7 languages, so that will be added shortly. We have a separate toolkit specifically for outreach to immigrant families that highlights eligibility for the child tax credit, as well as for the 3rd round of stimulus payments. And this guide includes talking points, press release, sample media pitch, and a media guide. It also includes a flyer, other social media graphics and posts, a sample text message, a sample email, and a sample radio script. And all of these materials listed on this page are available in 6 languages. So these are some of the resources that we have. And this provides a summary to all of the links. Again, it's a lot of links. You don't need to know each one, but in addition to what I've shared, we do have other resources that address some of the questions and concerns that come up, especially around people who don't have social security numbers. So we have information on how to apply for an ITIN. We also have information on how to find help from a human if you're going to these different websites and you're not finding what you need. Some people have more complex or involved tax situations, so getting connected to a human is really important. So these are some of the resources we have, and if we don't have something that you feel like would be helpful or that you need, you can let us know. We'll connect you to it somewhere else, or maybe even create it if it doesn't exist. And specifically for California, for finding out more information about the California tax credits, these are some of the links that are useful. Finally, just additional top resources to connect people to help. GetCTC.org, you've heard about already. 211.org/CTC has some specific child tax credit information, and childtaxcredit.com has a great calculator to help people get a sense of how much money they may be eligible for. Again, just through the CTC, because they may be eligible for other California tax credits and the stimulus payments too. And the last resource, people can text if they feel more comfortable that way to get answers to questions. And this is my contact info. And so I will stop sharing now so that the next presenter can start.
So Pete, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Regina, and thanks, everybody. I don't have any prepared remarks. I think we were meant to cover questions, and so we would at this point invite people on the webinar to submit their questions. Ask us what we haven't covered. I've been following.
I was struck, Roxy, by kind of the 3-dimensional chess moment that we're in, which is, it seems that all of you said there's confusion, that families don't understand they're eligible, that it might be kind of confusing even how to apply. And then it runs out at the end of the year. So then there's advocacy needed to extend into next year, right? So for leaders, I'm curious between, I was curious, as all of you are advocates for families, I'm curious if you're finding some themes that are coming up from families where, these are the commonly asked questions. These are the areas where they're most often confused. It might be helpful for nonprofit leaders to know as they think about outreach.
Well, I can start with something that I get questions about in just about every presentation that I do, and my colleagues do as well. So that involves questions around two people who are claiming the same child for the child tax credit, or a situation where two parents, they don't live together and they alternate who can claim the child on the tax return each year. So the payments are automatically sent based on 2020 information, and that child is not living with that parent for 2020, I mean, for 2021. So someone else is getting the payment. And there, the what to do part, it does depend a little bit on the individual situation, and so there's not like one piece of advice to share right now. I would say that one thing to keep in mind is that it is resolvable. So if someone says, I'm not getting the payments and I'm eligible, well, they can get their money. Depending on the details, they might not get their money in 2021. So it can take a while sometimes if the IRS has to determine, okay, who is actually eligible to claim a child. That may take a couple of months sometimes to resolve. And if that happens, someone can still get their money, but they might not get it right when they need it. So that's something that I would keep in mind. And related to that is there's sometimes a lot of questions around, well, I didn't get payments starting in July. So am I going to get less? What happens? Am I going to miss out if I don't get advance payments at all? And the way the child tax credit works for 2021 is that a person can get half the credit in 2021. So if someone doesn't start receiving their payments until September, they'll still get half of the credit that they're eligible for. Their monthly payments will be larger than the person who got theirs in July. The other piece is if someone misses out completely on advance payments, they can get the full amount of the credit by filing a tax return in 2022.
While we're waiting for the next question, I thought I would jump in, and this is a point that Anna made earlier. When you're doing your outreach, you might want to discuss and emphasize with everyone that the best result for them would be to file a complete tax return. The non-filer portals are good, although as Anna showed earlier, the federal portal isn't available in Spanish or other languages. There are free tax filing options available online that do accommodate multiple languages. And folks can, if they haven't filed a return yet, they can also get not just the federal child tax credit, they can get the young child tax credit. So if they have a child 0 to 5, that's $1,000 per household. They can get the Cal EITC, they can get the Golden State Stimulus, right? So filing if you're going to go to all the trouble to fill things out, right? We think it's not that much more of a barrier to file a complete return. And we just want to emphasize that. You'll get more money back if you file a complete return, and it's not that much more of a burden.
For purposes of advertising, in other words, if you wanted to advertise on TV, is there any prepackaged whatnot to advertise? And then also for my metropolitan area here, if you wanted to advertise on TV, is there somewhere I could go to get some granulated look to see how many children are potentially affected in this area?
So
Go ahead,
I can answer the last part of that question. I'll share a link. There is an estimate done. It's broken into by Congress district because Congresswoman DeLauro pulled together some data on that. It's for all Congress districts. And so that is one level of data that we have for who's likely eligible in those congressional districts. I know that's maybe not the perfect geographical outline for some of our purposes, but that's at least, that'll give like a frame of reference, and I'll find that and share that link in the chat. In terms of a sort of like prepackaged PSA or video, I am not aware. I mean, I know that there's a lot of organizations putting content together. I don't know of something that's necessarily ready to go that doesn't maybe have an organizational logo associated with it, but I will let others chime in on that.
I'm not familiar with that either. However, there are some organizations that I can inquire about that. So if you want to either contact me or put your info in the chat, I can follow up with you about that.
Right. If I could jump in real quickly, I think what I'm hearing is two things. Are there pre-existing materials that we could use in a, say, a television ad, a PSA or something? And also, how would I find data that I can use to target those PSAs or those ads? There's also a third piece, which is, what is the call to action? If you can reach someone, if you get in front of them, what are you asking them to do? So I'm going to try and answer the second two, right? So in terms of finding data, right, you can find data at the neighborhood level, which, and by that we mean neighborhood groups of 100 to 200,000 people. There are like 70 of those neighborhoods in LA County, right? But you can find them at our real cost measure dashboard. I put the link in the chat. I'll do it again. It's www.unitedwaysca.org/real cost, REALCOST. I'll put that in the chat. But there's an interactive tool using Tableau, and you can look at your neighborhood and you can sort and look for how many households have young children, under 6. And you get some race and ethnicity data as well. The third piece, what is the call to action? There are multiple things you could do. One is you could point people to the federal non-filer portal. That's not ideal. It's kind of what exists now. When Code for America has their non-filer portal available, which will be in multiple languages, you can point people there. If you wanted to do something today, right, and say to people, file a complete tax return and you'll also get your federal child tax credit, you could, as Anna mentioned, ask them to text taxes to 211-211, or they could visit myfreetaxes.org. Both of those routes will send people to a free online filing option. And there are also some VITA sites that are still active now, right, even though tax season is over.
Pete Chante is asking a question about the age limitations.
I believe, and I might defer to Roxy, Gabriella, and Anna. I believe that credit is eligible up to, 17 years old. We were talking about the young children, 0 to 5, because those are the households that struggle the most financially, we find in our data. And they're also eligible for the 1,000 per household young child tax credit.
Yes, for the child tax credit, a child has to be under 18 on December 31st, 2021. So 17 or younger, they're eligible. And the federal child tax credit is worth $3,000 for children 6 to 17 and $3,600 for children under 6. I also wanted to add one more thing about the getctc.org website as a resource. The way it works is that they ask people questions to help identify if someone should use that tool or if they would be better off filing a tax return. So if someone is better off filing a tax return, they'll help make sure that that person gets service. They have another tool, getyourrefund.org, where they are doing full tax returns as well.
So we're seeing a question about how can someone claim a child born in 2021 but already filed taxes?
I can answer unless someone else wants to.
Please do.
Okay. Okay, so right now, someone has to hold off and stay put. The way that someone will be able to claim a child born in 2021 is by using the Child Tax Credit Update Portal, also known as CTC Up. The portal currently does not allow this feature to add a child. That is something that the IRS has indicated will be available later in the year. So we don't know exactly when later is. So right now, someone cannot claim a child born in 2021, but that will be how they do it. And if there is any issue with them doing that, then they'll be able to claim them on their 2021 tax return that they file in 2022.
Well, I don't know if you feel that there are any issues that we left off, but it's so great that you guys have so many resources that are available. I hope you guys are seeing on the nonprofit side that there are a lot of resources you can share with your clients, your audience, your staff, your board, and the community members around you, so we can bring these numbers up. I think you saw what we promised in the beginning, which is an amazing group of resources and brilliant people that are working to advocate for children, and that there's lots of tools available. So we'll keep talking about this. Thank you all so much, Anna, Gabrielle, Roxy, Pete, for being available, for sharing, being generous with all your resources and links. And thank you all for spending time on a Friday in August on this topic. And we'll keep talking. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.